Welcome to the Angry Ewok channel, and today we'll be discussing fleet tactics for Star Wars Armada. And in this video we will specifically be discussing attrition-based fleets or swarm tactic fleets that are focused on delivering small packets of damage consistently throughout the game in order to grind down their enemy. And this is a particular fleet style that I like because of how consistent it can be. If you have all of your ships shooting at the same targets and you have even small dice fixing elements in your fleet, it can yield a very consistent, very reliable source of damage over the course of the game. This is in contrast to what we call a burst fleet, which I'll discuss in a future video, which has most of its damage focused in one or two activations. That's typically what you end up with when you see something like a Boarding Trooper Avenger Star Destroyer, or a Demolisher, or even some high activation Onager builds, or something like a Ravager or an Erratus fleet. Those are very burst oriented fleets that just seek to win by delivering a massive amount of damage in a very short amount of time and usually flying away. Versus what we're looking at today is a group of smaller ships with moderate dice pools that are all contributing against the same target. And this can create a multiplicative effect against ships, because defensive tokens can only be used a certain amount of times before they become overheated, before they get discarded. And so what we're looking for today, what we're trying to create, is a situation where an enemy ship has to deal with multiple hits from multiple angles, overloading their defensive tokens and making them take more damage than they normally would like to, and leaving them without tokens. You'll see here an example fleet of rebels on the top facing off against an Imperial fleet on the bottom. We have an Onager and two Attrition light cruisers squaring off against an MC-80 Home 1, a CR-90, and two flotillas. And the thing that wins games for attrition-based fleets is the ability to land multiple shots on the same target in a turn, and the ability to do that for 1 to 2 turns consistently in order to give that damage time to add up. It also brings the added benefit of overloading tokens. It's one of the biggest benefits of this style of combat, is that tokens become overloaded, defensive capabilities are negated pretty quickly. You'll notice the arcs on the Imperial fleet, how they kind of converge in front of the MC-80. Armada is great because everything has momentum. That ship has to move forward a little bit at least, so you can have a pretty good guess of where your kill box needs to be oriented. And that yellow kill box is a big part of this concept, because we need to be flying in such a way that we're putting our most powerful arcs into that zone for next turn. We're setting up a turn in advance to be able to bring all of our guns to bear in that location. So the first turn is usually just a closing turn, a turn used to get into position, and here we see the end result. So going into turn 2, you'll notice that the Imperial fleet has several ships that can fire on the MC-80. These red lines indicate easy blue range shots, shots that are going to be powerful and hard for this assault for Home 1 to dodge, even if it goes first. Even if it goes first, it's going to have a hard time escaping those two Attritions. You see the yellow line from the Onager, that means it's a longer range shot, and it's going to be a little easier for the MC-80 to avoid due to the nature of the super weapon. But nonetheless, we have 3 different shooters, potentially 4 different arcs, shooting at the same facing of this MC-80, which is exactly what we want. Conversely, the Rebel player is out of position with the CR-90. He's not really in range to contribute to the fight, and the MC-80, being that it cannot even take gunnery teams, can only legally fire against one of the 2 Attritions. So at most you're going to take 1 shot, and you're going to have the ability to spend every defensive token that applies to mitigate that damage. So the other thing you want to see when you're using this tactic is you want to be getting as many attacks as you can, and to that end you want to be activating ships early in the round that are in danger of losing out on their opportunity to shoot. So for example, the Imperial fleet here, we said that the yellow line indicates that the onager probably has the least optimal shot, and so we want to go early in the round with the onager first if we can, because we don't want to miss out on that potential damage, because we feel good about the Aquitane's ability to get a shot. And so the priority has to go on getting more shots in the round, even if it's not an optimal shot. Here we see the position at the beginning of turn 3, and now that we got the arcs up, you'll notice that the two Aquitanes actually don't have a shot. The onager, due to its ignition token, would have a shot here, and so keeping with our theory, we want to go with the onager early in the round, as early as is safe, to try to get that shot off, because we want to get as many shots in on the target as we can. And one of the dangers of an attrition-based fleet, because you don't have one massive burst of damage, is that you're not going to kill your target. It's going to limp away, and those points are going to fly away from you. So that's always something to consider. And the skill of flying these fleets is having a good gauge of how long it'll take to kill a target, and not flying in such a way that you fly past it and your kill box moves away from the target too early before you kill it. And so that's a big concern of attrition-based fleets that you always have to keep in mind. To give a real-world example of this, I have a fleet that I'm flying on the top, facing off against Louis on the bottom. I'm flying Akbar Swarm. He's flying I believe it was a Sato fleet. But the point is, if you look at all my CR90s and my assault frigate, they're all angled in such a way as to use their speed to position themselves to where they can all focus on this MC-75 on the bottom of the screen, without, and hopefully limiting, the support that the assault frigate can lend to the attack. This is pretty much the whole concept of maneuver warfare in a nutshell. We want to be able to focus our point of attack on the enemy without letting him meet us in a head-on confrontation. We don't want to have to fight everything he's got. We want to fight everything we've got against as little of his as possible, so we can quickly and decisively crush it. And you'll see these red lines coming from the CR90s. Those are easy shots on the MC-75, and these orange shots, which are long-range shots that may or may not happen depending on the activation order of the turn, meaning that those are going to be ships that we want to activate late in the round, so that there's a higher probability that they will get to make those shots, because the more shots we deliver, the more pressure we exert on those tokens, even if they're only doing 2 to 3 damage, which is super consistent with TRCs especially. Those start to add up, and they start making him make choices between, well, do I brace a 3 damage hit to a 2 damage hit? I'm just going to get hit again here in a minute. Oh wait, there's a big MCA, there's an assault frigate about to hit me for 6 next turn possibly. I really don't. So you get a lot of damage through, either based on the potential threat of what you could hit him with later, or just simply because his tokens are burning. He's got no tokens anyway. You'll also see, potential shots on the assault frigate, but that's a secondary target, because our whole effort is to swoop to the right. You see this big red line kind of indicating the trajectory, and my assault frigate and my entire fleet wants to take to focus in on that 75. And the only danger here, the biggest danger here, is if you fly too fast and too hard just to isolate one side, you can potentially open yourself up to that ship escaping and you having nothing. So that's the big danger with attrition-based fleets, is do not overfly. Or if you do overfly, you better do enough damage that you can kill it, or hopefully have a contingency plan. A lot of people have a trailing ship or a hook ship, or maybe even some squadrons. Some rogues are really good for this, to clean up a beat up target that they've not quite brought down. So this is a nice quick in-game example. We won't go through the whole thing, but the point is, get everything you got shooting one piece of their fleet, kill it, and move on. Some thoughts on writing a good attrition-based fleet. The first thing you want to make sure you're doing is you need to have at least 3 combat ships in your list. And the reason for that is because you need to be getting at least 2 shots on a target in a turn for this concept to even work. And if you can get that third ship into the fight, that's much more, it amplifies and ramps up the damage much more because the tokens are getting burnt out very fast. You want to be able typically to attack at long range, and the reason for that is it is much easier to concentrate fire when you can fire a long way. It is super hard to get 2 or 3 black dice shots in a turn with hammerheads or with raiders. It's almost impossible because as soon as you go with that first ship, they're gonna be scared, be concerned, have red defense tokens, and they're gonna fly out of there. So it's not typically a good idea to have more than one black dice oriented ship in an attrition based fleet, because it's probably not going to be, it's going to be your first activation if it's got a shot, and it might do a lot of damage there, but it's probably not going to be able to contribute to the fight turn after turn after turn because of its limited range. And you want some kind of dice fixing in your ships. Typically you want something that can ensure at least 2 damage every time you pull the trigger, and at least 2 damage at long range. That typically turns out to be linked turbolaser towers, or turbolaser reroute circuits, or intensify forward firepower. And the reason for that is the consistency is just, it's so big, because if you start whiffing with shots, you're not getting that multiplicative effect, and you're not applying the pressure fast enough. The other thing you really want to look out for, if you can do it, is double arcing things, because again, the whole point is to create bunches of small packets of damage that add up over time, and double arcing something creates an additional shot, an additional defensive, an additional chance for them to spend tokens that you're creating. This video has been focused on ship combat with the attrition style. We have not really touched on squadron-based combat using attrition. Squadrons typically do the attrition style better than combat ships, and the reason for that is because they are not restricted by the maneuver template. They can move in any direction and change directions every turn, go back, forth, sideways. So they don't really require the same planning to keep all your shots going on the same target. They also have Bomber Command Center, and what Bomber Command Center does is it basically allows that dice fixing that we were talking about to apply to every single dice roll that you make with your bombers. And so squadrons are very effective at doing this same tactic, and they're less susceptible to losing an enemy ship from it flying in, doing damage, and flying past them, because those squadrons can do an immediate 180 and go chase it down. That being said, there's still a lot of value in understanding and using attrition tactics with combat ships in your fleet, because they can do it from a long way away, and they can do a little more burst if they're set up properly. Also, with the advent of the Clone Wars fleets coming out and them showing salvo tokens in their starter ship defensive suites, I think that salvo will play a large role in the landscape of Armada going forward, and the understanding of how to use multiple small dice pools to add up damage is going to be big going forward. So I just wanted to bring that out. Don't dismiss attrition-based combat ship fleets just because they're not squadron-based fleets. They're good, they're effective, but they require a lot of skill to fly, and it will reward you if you do it well. Thank you for watching.